So I'd like to introduce Matthew, Assistant Professor in the Technology, Innovation and Pedagogy Program at the University of North Carolina. North Colorado, sorry. US geography challenged. But more importantly, I've had the opportunity to spend some time with him over the last couple of days. He's a really knowledgeable, he's really articulate and very, very passionate about his work. So please make him very welcome.
Hello. Oh, I'm on. Hot mic. Well, welcome everybody. Today's talk is about the attributes of future digital teacher educators. So a little bit about my background first. Well, let's see if the slides work first. Hey, there it is. Oh, back. Okay. So a little bit about my background. I'm a former classroom teacher. So I taught for 9 years. I taught middle school social studies, and middle schoolers are, scary little creatures. And I was also researching game-based learning. I write for a blog called Edutopia, which is from the George Lucas Education Foundation, and they celebrate best practices in teacher classrooms. And I wrote a couple of books. The newest one is this one that's out, I think, tomorrow. And I also co-wrote a working paper for MGIEP on the limitations and strengths of using digital games as, quote, empathy machines. So I'm going to talk today, as will the panel, about the attributes of future digital teacher educators, which the prompt kind of made me think how awful I would be as a psychic. At breakfast today, we were reading some horoscopes, and they were about 20% accurate. So hopefully my average is a little bit better than 20% accurate. So first, my fears. My fear is that we're going to fall into the same trap and loop as we've done before with integrating technology into the classroom. Like this kid here. This is a very famous cheesy cover of Time magazine from about 2 years ago when virtual reality started to become, an affordable thing again, right? This is not the classroom of the future, or at least let's hope it's not. Fast forward to summer of 2018. I know a lot of people in my friend group are very excited about this film coming out, Ready Player One, from Steven Spielberg. Right? So, my nerdy friend, sorry. Yes, proudly so. So, anyway, in this film, he's going to the school, right? It's called the Oasis, and it's all in virtual reality, right? Again, I don't think school will all be in virtual reality. It's a nice thought, but that's not what I'm observing. My work is in the intersection of really good teaching and really good games, okay? And what does that look like in a classroom? And it actually doesn't look like putting a game in front of a child, putting a VR on somebody's head and expecting all the learning to happen in one concise environment, or ecosystem, I should say. I'm a firm believer in Seema Prepare's work, so if anybody has seen Gary Steger a couple of times so far today and yesterday, here's the quote, right? This quote is from, 38 years ago, maybe more, 40 years ago. So the role of the teacher is to create conditions for invention rather than provide ready-made knowledge, okay? So Seema Prepare saw computers, right? And computers were to be like the machine that would teach children. And Seema Prepare's paradigm is that children will teach the computer, okay? So again, my work, and there's another shot of Paul DeVarsy there, if you haven't seen him earlier. So my work actually is in the community of practice of an affinity group. What brings like-minded teachers together, many of us are here at this conference, to teach. Nothing happens in a vacuum. That's the first attribute of a future digital teacher. Actually, I don't know what the future digital teacher will be. That's my confession. I have no idea what the future digital teacher will be. What I'm doing is I'm taking the lessons of See More Prepare from 40 plus years ago, and I'm just applying it now, right? So a future teacher will do just what a present day teacher does really well, and that is to work together, to share openly. So if one of us in this tribe group here, okay, has a really good lesson, well, then they share it with one another openly and freely, and blog about it, and write about it, and tweet about it. So that's really important. Nothing happens isolated. Nothing well, at least. Just like good game environments, they're applying the principles of connected learning. Now, the principles of connected learning usually deal with informal learning spaces. So where kids learn on their own in libraries, in, self-organized learning environments, right? In the internet, on YouTube, right? So how do we bring this into the classroom? And future digital educators, or present-day expert digital educators, this is what they do. So my talk mainly has to do with a concept called gameful learning, not gamification. That's actually another one of my fears. I see a lot of this on Twitter, very fancy sticker economies using point systems and reward systems. I'd like to move away from gamification to this concept of gameful learning, okay? And this is a quote from a colleague at the University of Michigan, Barry Fishman, and he told me this is what he tells his students in college. High school used to be preparation for college. High school is now preparation for applying to college. Once these students come to his class, and I'm a college professor, I can see this too, is that students are ill-prepared for college and, of course, the real world because they're just preparing for exams. For many children, school is presented as a puzzle. Jesse Schell, who is a well-known game designer in our circle here, he just defines puzzles as fun problems. But the problem with a fun problem, or any problem or puzzle, is that once you solve it, it's boring. You already know how to do it, okay? And to children, school is an endless puzzle of worksheets, tests, more standardized tests, homework, and some of them get really good at it by like maybe first, second, third grade. They know the puzzle of school. But of course it gets boring because a puzzle is not replayable. This is something that Mitch Resnick writes about in Lifelong Kindergarten. Mitch runs the Scratch Lab at MIT, and he has a new book. And he says it's like we're teaching kids how to read by only using crossword puzzles and not actual books. Not gameful. So we need to have children in the flow channel. And this is something that game designers have embraced for years. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Right, Chris? So kids fall out of the flow channel once they've figured out that school is a puzzle. They get bored and they act out. Or it becomes too frustrating and teachers may not have time for them. Or they bring homework home, they do one problem and they don't know the second problem's solution. So let's talk about games then for a second. Games are a series of interesting choices. This is a definition of games from Sid Meier, a legendary game designer who created the Civilization series, a world-building game, a terrific game. And this is his definition. Not about rules and goals, but a series of interesting choices. That's what school should be, a series of interesting choices. And by doing this, teachers, like-minded teachers in this community of practice I studied, harness student choice and voice. They bring in informal learning into formal learning, stuff that kids like to do outside of school into the classroom. Nothing works without student choice and voice. It's a principle of connected learning. It's a component of project-based learning. It's a part of really good games. You need to have what's known as agency, or a perceived feeling that you have control over outcomes. Now, agency is a perception. It's an illusion games are often what they say are on rails, right, Chris?
No.
No? Contrarian.
Yeah.
So it seems like you have choice, but really you're going from A to B or maybe some other outcomes, right? So it doesn't mean, okay, kids, do whatever you want and you'll all self-organize. And that's not what Sugata was saying either, right? You know, you have to curate these choices and give them a menu of things to do. So this is one of the teachers in our group, Steve Isaacs, okay? And I promised him he'd be in the slides since he's not here today. And this is ClassCraft. ClassCraft is a learning management software tool, and they have something called Quests. So Quests are like a game. This might look like something you might see on, you know, on your phone after playing Candy Crush, where you've unlocked or where Mario has to go next. And these are where lessons go. So students can then pick what they want to learn about. And these aren't all games. You know, they might watch a game or play a game. They may create a project at the end. And it's all guided by choice, harnessing what they want to do. And Steve up there, he's the game master. That's his role. He's facilitating. He's like a curator, like in a museum or in a kindergarten classroom, as Mitch Resnick says, putting out playful invitations to learn, or affordances to learn, as they say. These teachers don't write lesson plans where every student will be able to do the same thing by the time the bell rings. That is not what the 21st century is about. When I was teaching in middle school, we used Google Classroom. And, I don't know, blended learning or, online learning. To borrow a term from Leonardo da Vinci, there was something he used called sfumatu, which I can't begin to, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right, but it means the blurred lines between the figures and the background. And to me, that's where we are with online learning. It's blurred. The day does not end when the bell rings. And you want students' appetites to continue so they'll continue learning when they're home. So that's what good teachers do. This is Steve's class. So what they did was they played a really old video game called the Oregon Trail. It's one of the first educational games. Then they reviewed it. They were writing about it. They published what they wrote about. Then they went on Minecraft and they downloaded an Oregon Trail map. Okay, and then they made that map better. So in this one class, it's interdisciplinary. They're learning writing, computers, coding, American history. So these are the components of gameful learning. Okay, one is called projective identities, which is a term from Professor James Paul G, where you take on different roles, like a prosthetic suit, and you are assuming different roles. In a classroom, that means students might become lawyers, or they might become computer experts, right? And the teacher also takes on a projective identity. Maybe they're running a game design studio. Maybe they're running a newspaper, and the students are all having different roles, and that newspaper gets published. That helps make learning meaningful. Who's heard of the concept of growth mindset or grit? Okay, so growth mindset is like the power of yet. Like you have the ability to do this, right? I like to champion something here from Bernard Suits in 1978 called illusory attitude. When you play a game, and all of us play games or have played games, we willingly accept the constraints and rules of the game system. And that's what learning needs to be like. Learning needs to be illusory, because then you feel safe to fail. There aren't any real-world consequences when you play a game. And that's how learning should be in a classroom. And that's a mindset or attitude students need to have. It's the difference between scoring a goal and kicking a ball into a net. And lastly, in gameful learning, it has to be a little bit unexpected. It can't be didactic. There are a lot of games that have one right answer, and we call those digital worksheets. Right? They're just fancy versions of textbooks. We need games with uncertain outcomes in the classroom, just like we study novels that have uncertain resolutions. And this is where gameful learning happens. It's illusory attitude, it's the idea of identity play, and high-quality ignorance. And I'm not talking about high-quality ignorance like saying climate change isn't real, U.S., but I'm saying that high-quality ignorance is not knowing what the outcome is going to be. When you're playing certain board games or video games, you don't know what the outcome is going to be. And it's scary, and it's fun, and it's gameful, and it's infinitely replayable. And teachers do this. Teachers are gameful. They want to do that over and over. Really good teachers, another attribute, is that they are servant leaders. They're like Sherpas. They lead from behind. So this is our friend Peggy Sheehy. She's on her knees at kid level. Students were playing World of Warcraft in class, while they were also reading the book The Hobbit and comparing and contrasting the journey. And students had an issue here with grammar. So she had just-in-time, on-demand teaching, as Jim G calls it. She calls them flash lessons. Stop everything, come here, knee level, I will teach you, then you'll go back to what you're doing. So assessments are done on the fly. This is very prevalent in games like Minecraft. All avatars are the same size. And here's the result. So I'm going to show a 1-minute video clip of a 10-year-old child who created a world in Minecraft. An open game, unpredictable outcomes, illusory mindset. This child made a video game out of cellular biology, something he wouldn't learn until high school. And in this game, you shrink down, and, well, he'll tell you.
Hello everybody, my name is Mark and I am a student here at Albert Einstein Academy, and today I will be showing you guys my cell game. So here, let me just clear my inventory very quickly. So this is not the final build. We are still going to be working out other things that our teacher, Mr. Pike, will tell us to. So let's just get right on into it. Right off the bat, move left after reading. Hi, I'm Uncle Stan, and this is Waddles. Oh yeah, I forgot to say, this is Gravity Falls theme. Waddles here has a virus. Shrink yourself and save the pig. So always always reset the game, and then pop right into it. Alright, here. Okay, now you're in the membrane. Grab the wings and fly through and not try to get hit by the phospholipids.
Does anybody here know what a phospholipid is? Good. Because a 10-year-old does. Okay, this is high school biology done by a 10-year-old because he's harnessing informal learning. It's gameful. We don't know how it's going to turn out. And by the way, it's the best thing for a teacher. Teachers love this. It's not going home and grading the same essay over and over. That is so painful, right? If you're watching a whole suite of these videos, it's amazing. It's so amazing that most of these teachers post them on YouTube. I don't remember the last time I ever posted a worksheet on YouTube or anywhere. So this is from a friend of mine, Mino Rami. She runs Microsoft's global Minecraft mentor program, and they have these little border blocks you can put in to prevent children from running away from the sandbox, not doing what the teacher wants them to do, right? But actually, it's a self-organized learning environment, just as Sugata was saying. Children will work to task if they want to, right? It's really all that simple. So my message today, before we go over to the panel, is as teachers in the 21st century, which I'm sick of saying because it's almost 2018, right? Teachers for the 22nd century, we have to embrace the unpredictable. We have to be less didactic. Thank you. Book plug. Thank you. Okay. So first we're going to introduce the panel. We have Vinnie, Harry, and Chris. And we're going to start with Chris, who's going to talk about a model of games for teachers. Sure. And then we're going to continue the conversation there.
Hello, hello. Okay, great. Turned on. So, hi, I'm a game designer. I've been making games for a really long time. The last few years I've been working with... Louder? There we go. Okay. It's been a long time since I've been a rock star, I guess. So, lost a habit. Anyway, Game design, I'm coming at this from a real different point of view than my other panelists because I am a game designer from the video games industry, and I've been working with educators. And so my feedback has to do with my observations on working with educators and knowing that what it is that we're trying to achieve with the gameful learning and game-based learning. And as I was going through and formulating my response, I realized that I wanted to approach this. The title of this is Attributes of a Digital Teacher. And so I thought about it as a character in a game, right? And that you've got these attributes. If you've ever played a computer role-playing game, your characters have attributes like strength and wisdom and dexterity and whatnot. And so I wanted to sort of think about, well, what are the personality traits of a teacher who is going to be able to work with game-based learning and think about these are things that you want to build in yourself and look for in other people and build up. So let me just go through the list here. I'll try to explain each one as we go along. Okay, the first attribute is being open. Open to ambiguity. The game-based learning process embraces uncertainty of outcome. Sorry, I have to read it off of here. I don't have it all memorized. But they trust in the decisions being made along the way. It's really like doing a math problem where the learning happens as we do the work. It's not so much about getting the answers, it's all about learning how to find these kinds of answers outside the classroom. If all you do is have applicability from within the classroom, which is really like teaching to the exam, you really aren't succeeding at the entire goal of education. We need to be teaching students how to succeed outside the classroom. So I was really pleased to hear Sugadamitra saying pretty much that same thing. I'd already typed this up, so we're kind of in sync that way. Patient. Teachers should be patient. You need to accept the need to allow students to find the solutions on their own, at their own speed, with their own unique way of using the tools the educator provides. This isn't just saying that let everyone run wild, but rather hang back and be available to support, even when your instincts say jump in. It's a struggle game designers face every time we watch new players trying to play the games that we've created. And so I understand the pain of not jumping in, but that's really what you have to do. That's how you let these students learn on their own. Be supportive. Accept the need not to supply the answer, but be there to provide the tools and the information as the students need them. Be a facilitator, not a controller. Attribute, playful. Allow yourselves to be playful, to relax and enjoy this creative process of problem solving. Be wise. Gain the information that validates the game-based learning approach, which is that play is a path for learning. It's not the only path, but it is a valid, effective tool that can be used with other tools. And lastly, be collaborative. First off, be willing to collaborate with your students, to be part of their efforts in learning. And secondly, to openly share and communicate with your peers. Share what you've learned, be part of the ongoing evolution of the field of playful learning. So that's kind of my list of attributes. I hope that resonates. I had a couple of other thoughts here real quick. Metaphorically speaking, the goal of what we're doing is learning not how to follow a recipe, it's about learning how to cook. And so that's what 21st competencies are all about. So we don't teach to the exam, we teach to how to reach the answers that will be on the exam. And that's really an important thing to understand. And after listening to the keynote, trust to that spontaneous organization. That's a real thing. We see it all the time. And that's a thing that if you're going to be a teacher using this approach, you have to accept that and relax and just let yourself be carried along. And it's pretty awesome when you see it happen. I've made a lot of games. I've seen the students working through this process, and it's really a fantastic thing. And it's like a trust fall of education where you're just kind of going and you're hoping that everything's going to work out, and it does, because kids are amazing, human beings are amazing. We're learning machines constantly, and we need to allow that to happen. That's all I have to say about that. Can I pass this along? Yeah, sure. You go, Harry.
I think I've used So I would like to share my thoughts on the attributes of a future teacher. And my thoughts flow from the work that I have done in higher education for almost 16 years, and my stints in the corporate world as well, seeing the world from both the sides. So as you know, there have been so many thoughts shared that the world is evolving very fast. It's a time where the digital transformation is being ushered, leading to the fourth industrial revolution, where the way we live and the way we work is completely getting transformed. At the same time, it's a world where the resource scarcity is going to be high. There are going to be environmental challenges, energy challenges, and there is attention deficit. We've seen the younger generation more glued into digital devices and so near to the digital devices, so connected to the outside world, and yet so disconnected to the people who live next to them. Also, millennials are natives to digital technologies. They have higher degree of exposure and competence, and there lies a challenge that how do we make both the worlds meet, and what would be the future role that we would look at for the teachers. I would like to share some insights from several thought leaders. Albert Einstein talked about, when he talks about the role of a teacher, he says that it's the supreme art of the teacher to awaken joy in creative expression and knowledge. So he talks about creativity and he talks about knowledge creation. And Henry Adams says that a teacher affects eternity. He can never tell where his influence stops. So it's a lifetime of an influence. And if we are talking of an inspirational teacher who impacts the life of an entire generation, what attributes should that teacher have? And I also draw from the work of Helen Keller, one of the very fine examples of indomitable human spirit, that despite being visually challenged, hearing and speech impaired, she made a huge contribution. She studied, was a philosopher, and wrote over 12 books, visiting and inspiring people across the world. And what was behind Helen Keller? What was behind that indomitable spirit? It was a great teacher who herself was visually challenged, and their association lasted for 29 years. That's what a teacher can do. And these are some very fine examples from which we could draw some inferences. And we are entering into a world that is ridden with violence, low tolerance, coupled with environmental and energy challenges, and the quest for happiness is ongoing. So we look for happiness in materialistic acquisitions, in the grades that we get, the colleges that we can go to, and the wealth that we can acquire. And we need to relook at all of that, because this is not going to be sustainable. So we need a world which is peaceful, tolerance, and has respect for each other. And we need to clearly make the students or the next generation of learners understand the concepts of joyful learning, understand their sources of happiness. So what is the role of a teacher? What are the attributes? So it is about a holistic development with foundations of a good character. So it is not just about technical knowledge, it's not just about theory, or it's not about that piece of degree. It is about a good human being, a caring human being who takes people along, and also enshrine the everlasting values of honesty, integrity, tolerance, and peace, equanimity, learning to deal with success and failure, and also emotional and spiritual well-being as well. So a teacher should not only just look at technical competence, but somebody who's a psychologist who can be a friend to a mentor to a student, and also harness multiple intelligences that children may possess. So different children have different learning styles. And they learn differently. So how can we use multiple pedagogies that are a confluence of technology pedagogical innovations that can help children have very distinctive learning experiences. So it's about instituting 21st century skills of critical thinking, collaboration, problem solving, and be lifelong learners. I think lifelong learning is important. So the role becomes that of a facilitator who kind of opens the door to look at problems from diverse points of view, to be able to generate choices, to be able to harness self-esteem in the student community. And in all of that, we need to think through what is the combination of technology, the real-world exposure, the connect with the industry that needs to be there. So I think and this has policy implications as well. So we need to ask questions about, do we need to relook at how our teachers are getting trained? How can industry and academia come together to create the teacher of the future? And how do you instill these multiple interdisciplinary thought processes in the future teacher? I'd just like to stop here.
Hello everybody, good afternoon. My name is Hari, and so there is an advantage to being the last one on the panel to speak. I've learned this over the conferences, and so I'm gaming my fellow panelists. So most of the things that you want to say have already been said. Okay. Second, you can get back to your panelists and disagree with what they have said, and they will never have a chance to get back at you. Okay. And the third one is it's time for questions. So, people have said what they have to say. So, I have a slightly different take. I mean, most of what we've said here are attributes that are required for educators of the 21st century is actually true. There is no debate about that. It's a lot of thought leaders here at this conference and in previous conferences that many of us have been attending over the years have said this time and again. So to me, I'm looking at, can we imagine what the societies of the future would look like? Can we look at 20 years from now, 30 years from now, and see what would the society look like? And so how do our children survive in a society like that, adapt and live a happy, peaceful coexistence with other citizens across the world? So what's the construct of that society going to look like? And if we imagine such a society and look at how, what kind of skills, attitudes the children of, the children of that future would look like, so will probably be a direct derivative of that would be what kind of teachers do we need in that kind of a future society, right? So, and predicting the future is not easy, as Brexit and Trump winning the election shows. It's so hard to difficult anything in the near future, forget predicting 20, 30 years down the line, right? So, and I don't think we should really seriously be worried too much about what the future will look like, because there's very little we can do about it, one. So, but nevertheless, so I'll give you a few examples and probably ask questions and get your perspective about it. So one of the things that we are working on a very separate project that I'm working on, which is we are talking about a sharing economy. We are talking about basically disintermediation. So these things are happening at such a rapid pace. For example, by 2030, I don't believe there are going to be any products that are going to be sold. Everything will be a service, right? I mean, we've seen that happen with the likes of Uber. Okay. Has it reduced car ownership? No. I mean, Uber is just 10 years old, so it's going to take a while for us to basically reduce ownership of cars. We're talking about automated self-driving cars. Okay, so the whole joy of buying a car is to actually drive it, to own it and drive it. When you just can't drive a car, how does it matter for you to even actually look at buying a car, unless you are a car racer or you're doing something very different than getting from point A to point B, right? So we're talking about Airbnb. So that's actually rattled the entire hospitality and hotel industry. So that's happening. We're talking about people not buying expensive clothes. There are maybe more than 24 startups in Silicon Valley where you can actually rent your clothes instead of buying them, right? So the millennials actually, this generation and the millennials basically are not big on ownership like our predecessors were. I mean, a lot of this ownership thing is basically a culture that has been driven from the past, but that's not how the millennials look at it. So 20 years down the line, when there are no products to be sold, I mean, shopping habits are changing. I think today, Amazon knows as to what I like better than what I know what I like. And that's, and I'm not really kidding. It tells me what kind of movies I've watched in the past, so it tells me what I should be watching, what I might like. Amazon tells me that, hey, you just ordered that blue jacket. You don't have to order one more because I know you have one at your home unless, and it knows whether I've returned that product or not. So it says time for you to get a gray one. Okay, so the shopping habits of the future generation are going to be very different considering, together Amazon, Facebook, Google, Apple would probably know better than, most about us than what we know about ourselves. So that's a kind of a scary scenario we're talking about. So in that kind of a world, what kind of a governance, what kind of data privacy, what kind of security, what kind of data ownership are we talking about? So how do children live their lives? I mean, privacy is almost zero these days. Pretty much these big four companies would know what you're doing. So how is the government going to work? What is the role of government when it comes to data privacy, security? How are we going to basically tell our children how to protect their identities? What do they need to do about this kind of a future? What is the role of the government versus how will these big companies start actively engaging with the government? I mean, all of you know of the story of how Facebook was accused of helping rig the elections so Trump could win it. So how do we basically let children live in a society like that? And what kind of skills are we talking about for children? To be successful in that is something that I don't have answers for. I think collectively, the panel and some of you here could help think us through and come with answers as to what those attributes should be. Right. So the other point, machine learning and artificial intelligence. I mean, there's a lot that is being talked about it. Yesterday, I think one of the esteemed members on one of the other panels started saying, in a context specific to India, that there are a lot of children here. We have a huge population, and so we should not let artificial intelligence and machine learning basically take away jobs from, and we should not use them to basically deny jobs to millions of people who are unemployed in this country, right? That's like, to me, saying let's, that's impeding what I call as Darwin's theory of what is the natural selection, right? It's like machine learning, artificial intelligence is happening, and there's no way we can stop it. Can we basically prevent, so we are going to push the country back by 30, 40 years if we are basically letting some of these things stop. For example, I was in Las Vegas for a conference a couple of months ago, and there is a resort, I think it's called a casino called Wynn. Steve Wynn is the owner of this resort. And I was very pleasantly surprised to find every room, they have 4,000, it's a very big casino, 4,700 rooms, all of them had Echo, the Amazon Echo device in every room. I was like, why do they have Echo here in every room? So I was pleasantly surprised to discover that they have removed this disintermediation. I mean, if you need a fresh pair of towels, you would call a number, a 0 or a 9 or 100 or whatever it is for you to get those things delivered. Now you don't have to do that. You just need to basically tell Echo, and Echo basically delivers it to you at your room. I mean, not Echo, somebody basically monitoring it. So there is no need for a central help desk, which is going to basically get you to, do some of these, so the disintermediation and productivity and efficiency is much higher. So again, this is just one example of what we are doing with artificial intelligence and NLP. I mean, there is a bunch of writing work that happens using NLP that today is basically automated. I know of companies that have eliminated hundreds of jobs with people actually taking spreadsheets and documents and making interpretations and writing content. So the role of a CFO is now threatened because we are saying NLP can actually take spreadsheets and start writing and making interpretations of the data and saying whether your sales trend is up, it's down, already doing that for you. So there's so these are some of the changes that we're talking about, 20, 30 years down the line. And critical thinking, so whoever is thinking that critical thinking, problem solving, communication, collaboration are important skills, they're important. But if you are, as educator, worried as to how we are going to achieve those and how we are going to drive those in the children, there are no solutions today, so you have a responsibility as an educator to do that. But 10 years down the line, I don't think any educator should be worried about this because the machines are going to take care of them. Technology is going to basically help teachers drive some of these attributes. The most important role, according to me, there are 4 or 5 attributes that are really important, and we can have a more detailed conversation about them. It's self-regulation. As a 21st century student or the future student, I would think of an attribute saying, as a teacher, can I help self-regulation among students? I mean, will my students have grit? Will my students have determination? Will my students have a global perspective? So these are some of the skills which are on the softer side, not so much on the quant side, that I believe are important. So with that, I think I'll open up the floor for questions to the panel, and if or maybe summary. Is that?
Sure.
So let me do it.
Okay,
Yeah.
you're going to do it. Tony, yeah.
Firstly, let's take a pause.
Okay.
So in the last session with Sagutra, we learned a lot, and one of them was so taking that on board. There are 2 microphones. There's one here at the moment, maybe not going to use it, and there is one over here, maybe not going to use it. Okay? Instead of me having to organise the microphones, here's the rules. Ask a question, ask it quickly, pass the microphone on to someone else who would like to use it. We have 15 minutes, and in 15 minutes I'll stop. There's the plan. So, not rushed, but in a way that as many people who have questions as possible get the opportunity to ask them. Fair enough? Righto. You had a question, and everybody got the microphone too. Ask it on, and the microphone.
So what adjustments have to be made to the way that we train teachers in order to better prepare them for dealing with this very different world?
Well, the way teachers need to be trained, and this is, well, I'm in teacher education, so I'm embedding this in practice, is to have teachers co-design with students. So in teacher training and teacher education, we just literally do that. So teachers are co-designing with the professor. Teachers use tools, projects like Genius Hour, right, where students have choice and students can spend time making and designing their own projects. All of the assessments are actually reflection-based. So what students do is students will make a project or create or do something, and then what they do is they reflect on it, and then they tie together the research that's behind it. And that's for teacher education as well. So it has to be baked into practice. And teachers also should be using, and this is from my research of expert teachers, is to use the classroom as a petri dish to open up the doors to technology companies and to ask students, what do you think about this? How would you design a lesson in Minecraft? How would you design a lesson in a Vive VR set? What would you do? What would the learning outcomes be? Here are the standards we're supposed to meet. How do you think we should meet them? Co-designing with students is very powerful, and that is something that should be embraced in the future. Because I don't know what the future is going to bring, but I do know the best practices of today, and that's what we need to apply.
I'd like to add on to that, if you don't mind. I think that there's an opportunity for teachers to use these techniques with each other, with the peers, and work through collectively training yourselves on how to become better teachers with this new technique, right? It's a new approach. It's safe because you're working with peers. You get to do it. You don't have to look silly in front of the kids, right? Kind of do that, get comfortable with it, and then take it back to your classroom and do it. We had a wonderful session yesterday. It was a workshop where we took a concept and took it through to a prototype phase. That's the kind of thing. Just do it, right? Just as we saw there, just try it, do it, find a safe place with other like-minded people, and just start doing it. The training is driven by yourself, not imposed on you by an outside force. That's kind of the whole thing that we're talking about here.
So I think if we look at teacher training, there are multiple facets to it. So they could be right from the beginning when someone takes teaching as a career option. At that point of time, they go through a formal degree, a B.Ed program or an M.Ed program. I think we need to relook at the curriculum for the B.Ed and the M.Ed program and involve elements of pedagogical innovation. We basically need to look at three aspects: content, pedagogy, and the technology element closely embedded. And there could be multiple combinations of these three depending upon what learning outcomes need to be driven. And for teachers who undergo continuous training, there are at any given point of time several new opportunities around games for learning or educational technology tools that are available that help children collaborate with each other, work as teams, develop 21st century skills. We need to continuously, the teachers need to be part of peer network. There needs to be peer-assisted learning. So there are global educator networks that are available. I can talk about Microsoft, where there are millions of teachers connected to each other and collaborating on multiple disciplines and learning areas. So it's basically lifelong learning and continuously evaluating new tools and imbibing them in the classroom.
And two thoughts to build off of that. One, when Sugata was talking before about, just putting a computer, a hole in the wall, right? What that really plays into is something from Maria Montessori, a Montessorian approach, right? Where these devices, especially commercial devices, so if you're talking about commercial games or commercial software like iMovie, for example, it's designed to be picked up and used by a consumer, unlike, let's say, a testing product from a large company like, I won't single any large companies out. But, that's really the difference, right? You've got the tools already made to be used, and it's actually playful. They already are inviting you to play and mess around with stuff. And also building off of what Vinnie was saying with the Minecraft community is that not just game-based learning, but maker spaces, and all of this is not top-down. We're seeing it bottoms up. We're seeing teachers want to bring these things to their students because they see wonderful things. So we need teachers in the future that are open-minded, but also collaborative and will empower each other.
Professor Matthew, this is very specific to our country. In our education system, we have so many universities, and there are so many layers. So, for instance, if we take one university, they may be having ethical values as a subject in their curriculum. But why can't it be done in all the universities? Rather, as a global agenda, UNESCO can take a lead and say that to all the countries, can make it a point right from the class 1 or first standard to whatever it is, up to PG, why can't be a subject on good character or what we call it integrity, honesty and all those things? So that otherwise each and every teacher is focusing on certain areas. So what I feel that when there is a continuous subject right from the beginning to end, so then there may be a good results in the 21st century. So how it will be? Whether UNESCO is thinking on those lines. That is my point.
So, yeah, that's a very good question. It's like in the Indian context, I will answer that question. We have a subject called Sanskrit, right? Nobody ever speaks it. I mean, I've never heard people converse in Sanskrit unless you go into a Sanskrit university or a very few select scholarly people. So, by just UNESCO mandating it or some agency or the government mandating it and us putting it in the subject as what children learn in the school will not solve for the problem of, in my opinion, will not solve for the problems of ethics, integrity, values, as they say, right? Values cannot be taught, they have to be caught, which is the children basically learn from what's happening in their surroundings, what they see, observe, learn is what they internalize. So it's not to me, it's a much larger and a wider issue than just a line or a subject in the curriculum that goes from grade 1 or kindergarten all the way to the university level. So I hope I've answered the question. Thank you.
Professor Matthew. We've got to keep going really quickly. I'm Australian and I don't mean to offend, but we're asking questions, we're not making statements. And that way we'll get 4 or 5 questions in very quickly in the next 4.5 minutes. Go and then there.
Okay. So, hi, my name is Misha and my question is to 2 panelists, Matthew and Chris. So the challenge for today's teacher is to make the learning, the knowledge imparting process fun for the students. And the answer to is obviously gamification or game-based learning or gamefulness, as you have said. So what would you suggest for the teachers today, how they should do it in the classrooms or outside the classrooms so that it becomes better and the students are able to learn in a much better way?
Thank you.
I'll start. Seymour Prepare came up with this, a child actually came up to him when he was using this programming tool called Logo and said, this is hard. This is fun. It's hard fun, right? That's what we need more of in classrooms. We need this idea of hard fun, or what Jim G calls games, pleasantly frustrating. Oftentimes, learning is too rote and too easy, okay? And when we give kids playful tools, and it can be a game, it could be remixing clips in iMovie, right? All of that is actually fun to do, and students will bring themselves to what Vygotsky calls the zone of proximal development, when you're in the outside as a novice and then you're moving towards becoming a master, okay? And for that to happen, we need to stop thinking about all students learning the same thing by the time the bell rings, and really harnessing in those interests and making things more challenging. For example, yes, if a child likes to make games in Minecraft or build stuff, well then what should they do next? Do they like watching YouTube videos about Minecraft? Well, that's what they should be doing then, right? They should be engaging in their own affinity spaces. If they like reading fan fiction stories on the internet, well, then they should not just write them, but they should publish fan fiction stories on the internet. And is it hard? Is it fun? Yes. Chris?
Okay.
Yeah, so first off, I want to kind of redirect the question. The question was, how do teachers make it more fun for the students? I would change the word fun and make it engaging, right? Engagement is really what you're talking about. The word fun is associated with being silly and frivolous and pointless, and engaging means that you're there, you're pushing, you're challenged at just the right level, you are into it, and you want to succeed, you feel that you can succeed. And that's where this approach really works well. Instead of having a class of however many kids and the teachers dragging everyone along at the same pace, and some kids could move faster and others need to go a little slower and catch up, right? This is an approach that says every child gets to move at their own pace. The teacher's there to help whenever anyone says they need help. They're doing it for themselves. That's engaging, it's empowering, and it's meaningful to the student to achieve that for themselves as opposed to having it imposed on them by somebody else. And that's what this is all about, is doing that. And when you do that and you let them do it for themselves and you help part of that process, it's meaningful for you to be a helper, and it's meaningful for them to have achieved it on their own.
3 more questions.
And one quick quote from a book called The Ambiguity of Play, which is a seminal work about how play is different lenses that you view from. And that is that sometimes golf can feel like work and research can feel like play, okay? And I think that really resonates. It doesn't all have to be a game, right?
Gentlemen.
Professor Matthew, you spoke about illusory attitudes. Given that our system is so competitive, how could we make learning consequence-free?
Oh, that's pretty straightforward, right? We can use games that are open-ended, right? Games that can be read like text, and they don't have to be won. One game won by winning, right? One game I've used in the class to teach empathy is called the Migrant Trail, and in that game you play as migrants going over the border from Mexico into the United States. That's not a game that somebody would really want to win. My students in the class aren't comparing high scores. They're entering into this experience. It's an impossible field trip, right? And then the assessments come after that. So it's like using a book, right? Nobody's trying to win a book by reading it the fastest. Well, let's hope not, right? And then all the learning comes like spokes out of the wheel, right? Out of the hub. So that's how games are used. So if you're using a board game or you're using a digital game or just a tool, we want it doesn't have to be competitive. It doesn't even have to be cooperative. It just has to be an experience.
So, okay. Unless someone grabs the microphone, I'm going to presume we move on to the next question. Okay, go.
So my question is to the panel. In an educational setting, evaluations and assessments play a very crucial role. So how do you integrate technology for proficient and beginner players by corresponding evaluations and assessments? And what kind of educational or technological tools are there? For example, one of them is GPAI, which is Game Performance Assessment Instrument. And it's very costly and it's a little complex for the educators even to adapt and use the technology to assess students in game-based learning in the TGFU approach. So your comments on how do you actually integrate assessments to beginners, proficient, team-based learning, and individual personalized learning as well. Thanks.
Okay, so I have some experience in designing games that have integrated assessment built in that will then take play metrics and give it to teachers on a dashboard so they can see individual students' progress in the various games that they're engaging in, right? And then they can use that to assess it. You are correct. That's hard to do right now. So making digital games is hard. It's not easy at all. It's a tough thing to do. There's a technology and there's a pedagogy and there's the engagement and the game design and all that stuff has to happen. And now we've got this extra thing that we're doing, which we're inserting these data capture points at the right places to give meaningful information back to the educator so that they can set it. So what you want to do is set it up so it's as if the teacher was there looking over every child's shoulder and reading their mind for what's happening. Okay, that's kind of the grail. So we want to get those data things. We get a picture, we do it. This is really, really new. It's all being developed. So everything that's new costs a lot, and it doesn't work quite right, but we keep going back and we're reiterating it, right? And this is like, I sound like a broken record. This is just kind of the way that we do things in the 21st century. We propose something, we try it, we learn from that, we go back, we evolve it, we do it again. 10 years from now, there's going to be software packages that are inexpensive, and knowing how to do this is going to be a known thing. Through conferences like this, we're all going to be really conversant with it. This is the kind of endeavor that drives that kind of improvement. And so we're part of making those assessments become really, really accessible and better and better and better and more informative.
To slightly contradict what Chris is saying, in my research, 0% of the teachers in the group that I researched used any teacher dashboards, with an exception of Minecraft, because Minecraft uses a reflection model where students take pictures and they put it in a portfolio, and then they write about it and reflect about it. So a lot of really good teachers, what they do is, like Paul over there, his students will take screenshots and Google Docs or something similar, they will write reflections. And those reflections are from the point of view of the character that they take on. So if you're playing SimCity and you're a mayor of a city, well, then you're going to write from the point of view of that city. So you're really extending the learning or transferring the learning from the digital space to outside of the digital space. And those are called reflections on action, from Donald Schoen, the reflective practitioner. And that's really powerful, to reflect, not just to do, but to reflect.
Just to respond real quick, teachers aren't using those things because they're brand new, and it's not accepted practice to do it. You're just not used to doing it. I'm predicting that's gonna change because it's too useful to ignore.
Gentleman in the white shirt.
Sir, this is a question for the total panel. What I am listening from yesterday, the thing is, everything is changing. The word teacher is not changing. Why not this UNESCO and this thing, we have some appropriate word for the teacher. For example, physically disabled is not now. This is now physically enabled or differently abled word is there. We are not calling as a disabled, differently abled. So why not we have some word teacher? Because psychological effect is teacher means he teach. Why not appropriate word you think for the teacher for this Internet of Things or IT world or this type of technological world, such that it should be psychologically shift to traditional to this world? Thank you very much.
What's the question? I'm not sure of the question. The question is?
Question is, any appropriate word for teacher which can be replaced for this technological word?
So do you like the word dinosaur?
Anything, such that it should be acceptable to all the society, students and everything. Because psychologically it is teacher means so and so.
Okay.
I don't think, that's a very good point.
No, not replace. Word teacher. Word. Psychologically, the word teacher affects lot in the student. So why not we replace I am not going to say replace teacher. Word can be changed. The teacher, something other than that word.
Okay.
That is the thing.
Who's going to have a go at that out of the panel? So, you're there?
No, I like to add on this is that, like Professor Sugata Mitra was saying, that a 2-year-old, give him an iPad, he'll start working on that. Now, there is always a big gap between me as a teacher and the student in terms of technology. I may be 20 years behind the student as far as technology is concerned. Now, the way the technology is moving ahead, how do we cope up as a teacher?
Yeah.
I asked it to Hari.
So that's the question. How do they cope as teachers?
According to me, that what is my observation is, whatever the teacher knows, he try to disseminate, not inculcating a new technologies, particularly in the teaching, right? So, other one thing, another side, on the name of the technology, business is also going on. The technocrats developing, they try to completely remove the human being. Human being is a center point in the teaching. They want to replace the human being and a teacher. Without a teacher, is it possible to develop the teaching learning process? Technology developed by the human being. But technocrats try to remove the teacher. Yeah, so that is going on. That is going on.
Listen.
So what about the creativity? Suppose I think technology will do everything. What about the creativity? reality, domain knowledge definitely may disappear.
No, hang on, stop. So let's have an answer, because people are starting to leave because it's after the time. So let's get an answer and finish this up.
So probably I'll quickly answer that question. Technocrats steal the teacher's job is their business. Protecting it is your business. Okay. So this is a democracy. I mean, so this is, everybody can say this. Okay. Why should we be excused from the revolution and innovation that's happening in technology? Banks are not excused. Retail is not excused. Government is not excused. So every sphere of our life that's happening. So if we don't adapt, we will not survive. That's why I said, do you like the word dinosaur better than a teacher? So here adapting is the key here. So I don't think we have any other choice at this point of time. Right?
Okay.
One last thought.
You're in charge.
Second last thought is that we've been through this cycle before. I've seen this movie already. Okay? We've had computers in the classroom. That did not replace the teacher. Okay? These are just tools. VR, iMovie, really good video games. The teacher is not going anywhere. You can call the teacher a game master. You can call the teacher a curator. But that model's not changing unless we get rid of formal education altogether. It's a support system.
Okay. Please thank the panel and for their expertise.